Every time we eat, there's actually this wild microscopic mystery unfolding right inside our bodies. The chemical structures of the food you're consuming are quietly but profoundly dictating your macroscopic, everyday well-being. So welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving deep into the chemistry of carbohydrates. By pulling back the curtain on the actual molecular bonds that make up our meals, we're going to see exactly how they shape our metabolic health.
Let me ask you something. Think about these three distinct foods: a roll of bread, a bowl of rice, or a can of soda. Which one do you think has the least carbohydrates? Well, it's actually a trick question. Sure, they obviously differ immensely when it comes to fats or vitamins and other nutritional components, but strictly speaking, their carbohydrate load is virtually identical. Nutritionally, your body looks at all three of these items and essentially sees the exact same thing.
To understand why your body treats bread, rice, and soda identically in this context, we gotta clarify what carbohydrates actually are. Nutritionally speaking, carbs are essentially just the category for sugars and the larger, more intricate molecules that your body ultimately breaks down to make sugars. So at a foundational, chemical level, anytime we talk about consuming carbs, we're really just talking about processing sugar. The entire category is built right around it. Now, let's break this down. At the simplest level, we have simple sugars, or monosaccharides. These are your single unit building blocks. Think glucose, fructose, and galactose. Link a couple of those together, and you've got disaccharides, like lactose or sucrose. But if you look at the more complex end of the spectrum, we have complex carbohydrates. These are oligosaccharides with maybe 3 to 10 linked sugars, or massive polysaccharides that have dozens, hundreds, or literally thousands of linked sugars. And here's the thing. Human digestion is basically reverse engineering. When you eat a complex carb, your body's main job is to diligently break those massive chains all the way back down into single, simple monosaccharides, because only then can your cells actually absorb them and use them for energy. Okay, let's move into our first section, the microscopic pivot, starch versus fiber. So, while digestion is all about breaking down those complex carbohydrate chains, your digestive tract doesn't actually respond to all complex carbs in the exact same way. Let's look at starch and fiber. Both of these are plant-derived polysaccharides, right? Both are made of hundreds to thousands of joined monosaccharides. But the absolutely crucial difference is how they're chemically joined. In starches, the glucose molecules are connected by what we call alpha linkages. You can think of your digestive enzymes like a pair of biological scissors. They can easily and rapidly snip these alpha bonds apart. Fiber, on the other hand, that's connected by beta bonds, and human beings literally do not possess the biological enzymes required to break beta bonds down. They act as an impenetrable shield. In fact, this beta bond structure is so resilient that fiber can physically trap nearby starches, which stops them from being digested too. Scientists call this phenomenon resistant starch.
Which brings us to section 2, blood sugar and the glycemic index.
That tiny microscopic distinction between alpha and beta bonds, it changes everything about how a specific food impacts your physiological state. When you eat things like soda or white bread, those easily cleaved alpha starches get ripped apart by our enzymes almost instantly. This triggers a massive, rapid rush of glucose straight in your bloodstream, spiking your blood sugar. That's what gives them a high glycemic index. Now contrast that with vegetables, fruits, and whole grains. Because these whole foods are heavily packed with fiber and those unbreakable beta bonds we just talked about, the digestive process physically slows down. That impenetrable fiber acts as a barrier, meaning the glucose just enters your bloodstream at a slow, steady trickle, resulting in a much lower glycemic index. And of course, foods with virtually no carbs, like eggs, cheese, and meats, naturally have the lowest glycemic impact of all. All right, let's dive into section 3, the insulin response system. So what happens once that glucose actually moves from your digestive tract and gets into your blood? Well, a highly coordinated biological sequence kicks off. First, your blood sugar rises. Then, your body jumps into action, and the pancreas synthesizes and secretes a hormone called insulin. Insulin travels through your blood and acts exactly like a key. It binds to receptors on your muscle and fat cells, unlocking them and telling them to open up and let the circulating glucose inside. And once that glucose is successfully inside the cell, boom, the conversion of that sugar into usable cellular energy is jump-started. Without a doubt, insulin is your body's primary manager for handling sugar and keeping your metabolism in equilibrium. But here's the problem. The human body just wasn't evolved to handle a constant, relentless barrage of easily cleaved alpha bonds. If you're chronically consuming massive amounts of easily digested carbohydrates, you're constantly flooding your bloodstream with glucose. And to cope with that, your pancreas continuously floods your system with insulin. Over time, the constant presence of this hormone causes your cells, especially your muscle cells, to become totally exhausted. They basically start ignoring the insulin signal. The biological key just won't turn the lock anymore. Because the cells are now less responsive, all that glucose stays trapped in your bloodstream. Your pancreas panics at these persistently high blood sugar levels and pumps out even more insulin in a desperate attempt to force the doors open. This dangerous systemic breakdown is what we call insulin resistance, and it marks a severe failure of your body's metabolic machinery. Now let's look at the bigger picture in Section 4, Zooming Out, the Metabolic Syndrome Threat. When insulin resistance takes hold on a cellular level, the macroscopic long-term health consequences are incredibly severe. And a lot of scientists and medical professionals believe insulin resistance is actually a direct pathway to something called metabolic syndrome. It's this constellation of symptoms, persistently high blood sugar, and increasing waist circumference, and elevated blood pressure that drastically increases your risk for catastrophic health outcomes. Your body is essentially suffocating in its own unutilized energy, which leads to massive physiological risks like cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes. It's crazy to think about, but this cascading systemic failure starts all the way down at the microscopic level of a simple carbohydrate bond.
And the reality of this breakdown is pretty stark. Right now, 32% of the United States population has metabolic syndrome. Think about that. That is nearly 1 in 3 people currently dealing with a severe, compounding health crisis, driven in massive part by how human biology processes the easily digested carbohydrates that absolutely dominate the modern diet. And this staggering number isn't just an isolated issue either. Metabolic syndrome is rapidly increasing in populations all over the globe as diets shift more and more towards simple, refined starches.
So, it leaves us with this really profound realization. Whether your food tastes sweet or not, sugar is sugar. Your cellular machinery doesn't care if you're eating a sweet piece of candy or a savory, salty slice of white bread. If those molecular bonds are easily broken, it all gets processed as an overwhelming rush of glucose. Understanding the chemistry of alpha and beta bonds honestly changes how we view every single meal. So, armed with this knowledge of how your own cells are handling this metabolic burden, is this molecular reality going to make you think twice before grabbing that heavily processed pasta or that sushi roll or a donut? How is your body truly going to process your next meal?